So Karen Laborie is a project manager at walkrollmap.org, a new research project that gathers crowdsourced reports of microbarriers to walkable environments. She has a wealth of project management and research experience examining the built environment, health and active transportation. No stranger to community engagement and crowdsourced data, she has been the executive director of bikemaps.org since 2016. Karen is affiliated with the Geography Department at the University of Victoria and the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University. So Karen, thank you.
Okay, so I'm not an Olympian. I am Canadian, though. I'm really excited to be here to share with you walkrollmap.org. So I guess I just will signal the next slide, please. Or do I have a little clicker somewhere? No? Oh. Oh, there we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm from Canada, and so the photo on the left, you know, we've got lots of wide open spaces, and but really, most of us live in cities, and these cities have increasingly been created, and they're to be pretty biased towards car and car travel, and so that's obviously an issue. And like many places in the world, inactivity is a major health concern, you know, the other health concern prior to COVID. And as we've heard before, you know, it's responsible for heart disease, certain cancers, diabetes, and is, you know, the fourth leading cause of death worldwide. So we also know that research has shown us that places that are walkable or bikeable, you know, are great antidote to inactivity. And we've seen that in cities around the world, many of which are European, that people from living in these places have better health outcomes. And so this is, you know, what we want to achieve. But many of our cities in Canada lack infrastructure that supports walking. We also don't really know what's on the ground in many parts of Canada, in many jurisdictions. Some cities do a really good job of keeping track, but many, you know, medium or smaller ones, you just don't have the capacity. We don't know where these barriers lie, when they exist. You know, some places that might be quite walkable in the summer, you know, much of Canada is quite snowy in the winter, icy, and so these are huge barriers. And also for whom, you know, as we've heard many times before, there's an equity issue here, and not everybody experiences the public realm in the same way. And so having this data will help community organizations, you know, hold their local governments accountable. They'll also help us as researchers have this kind of data to understand what are the barriers for walkability. And it can help cities target their actions. You know, I live in Saanich, British Columbia, which is a suburb of Victoria, and less than 20% of Saanich has sidewalks. So we're not getting sidewalks everywhere anytime soon. So understanding where some of these quick wins can exist, where we can prioritize improving the built environment, helps cities that do want to become more walkable or, you know, bikeable. So one of the ways that we can fill in the data gaps is through citizen science or crowdsourcing or volunteer geographic information. And this is something that our research team has quite a bit of experience with. In 2014, we created bikemaps.org, which was a way to fill in the data gaps left by official data sources of, you know, understanding cycling crashes. We recognized that there was less than a third of cycling crashes were collected by official reports. And as we've been rolling out bikemaps.org to different cities around the world, you know, primarily in North America, we've been asked, you know, time and time again, can you do something for the pedestrian environment? Because this is really lacking. And so the result is our project, walkrollmap.org. And so the goal of walkrollmap.org is to fill in some of these data gaps by crowdsourcing micro barriers to safe and comfortable walking and rolling. And so I use the term rolling, we heard it earlier today, as wheeling. So it's basically, you know, the pedestrian environment for people on 2 feet, but also people who are in wheelchairs or using mobility devices. And our recruitment strategy is to, as much as possible, work with local community organizations so that we can reach some of those hard to reach people, more marginalized groups. So this is what walkrollmap.org looks like, and this is southern Vancouver Island, where I'm from. And so I should start by saying it's a website, and so we don't actually have an app, but we've made the website mobile friendly. We know from our experience with bike maps, it was challenging to update the apps, and I think we've heard from other people that apps can be a bit problematic. We have it translated into French and Spanish as well. And to fill out a report on walkrollmap.org, it should take you less than a minute. There's 3 different types of reports that you can make. There's hazards or concerns, missing amenity, or you could report an incident. So, a fall, a near miss, or a collision, perhaps a collision with a vehicle. And so, again, some of the key populations that we're trying to reach are seniors or older adults, and people with disabilities, and as well marginalized communities. So, diverse genders, racialized people, just people who don't always experience, have barriers in how they move around the built environment. So the first type of report that you can make is the hazard or concern, and that's what we're seeing a lot of reports coming in as. And so you could make a report as a sidewalk issue or footpath, as you call them here, crossing issues. So maybe, the crosswalk just doesn't exist, or there's something with the signalization. As well, there are, you can report seasonal or weather-related concerns. And finally, the last sort of category is around personal safety or comfort concerns. And so, again, we recognize that not everyone experiences the built environment in the same way based on their identity. And so this is a way that if, say I as a woman am out walking and there's, lighting lacking, I'm not going to feel the same as someone else who, maybe is someone my age is male. So this is a way to report some of those issues as well. And again, it's important that we reach diverse people to get the range of experiences in the built environment. One of the things I should mention too is we collect demographic data, so we don't ask for your personal identity in terms of your email address or who you are, your name, but we do ask your age, your gender, whether you have a disability, and what's your racial background. And we do this so that we understand who we're targeting or who we've reached and who we're not reaching yet, and also to understand is how these reports differ by your background. The next type of report that you can make are missing amenities. And we've heard a lot about benches, and I think, benches are the missing mobility amenity that, some people may not recognize. And, these benches are a great way to also, create some social connectedness in our communities as well. We have quite a shopping list of different types of amenities that you can report. So water fountains, washrooms, which are important for people getting around town. And as well, there is an other category. So if there's something that's quite locally relevant, you could put it in under there. And there is the capacity to kind of give a bit more of a description. So if something starts to, be very specific to your community, you can put it in there. And finally, the last type of report that you can make is around incidents. And so this is very similar to what we were doing with bikemaps.org, but this is, where you can report if you've been hit by a car or hit by a bike or one of those, e-scooters that we're hearing so much about, whether you've had a fall or whether you've had a near miss. And I'd like to draw your attention to the description that's been put up there. This is another thing. Every report allows you, and we're actually encouraging people to provide, a bit of a narrative of what happened. And in doing so, we found this with bike maps, and this is why we have this in this platform as well, is you get some very rich qualitative data, and it really allows you to understand what the issue is at that location. So, near misses are something that can be collected, especially in areas where there may not be a lot of official reports. It really helps you understand what the issue is at that particular spot. before waiting for something a bit more tragic to happen. This spot I went, this was a hotspot from the insurance company of British Columbia for their pedestrian data that they collect from vehicle claims. And so I went to look, there was a few around the area, and I went to take a photo to make a tweet about it. And I was there 2 minutes, and it was quite obvious. These two children are crossing with a light, a pedestrian light, and the vehicle's turning right, doesn't even see them. So sometimes it's pretty obvious what the issue is at a certain spot. And so collecting near-miss data can help illuminate what the issue is without waiting for something more tragic to happen. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to as well, on our website, under the Explore tab, we have a visualization page. So you can filter the data by type of report. You can filter it by date range. You can also filter it by a spatial extent. So in this case, this is all the reports at a certain time from Canada. If your community is interested in using walkrollmap.org and you'd like to see your community listed as the spatial subset, so maybe Limerick, we could put Limerick on there, and there'll be the geographic area, and so then all the reports from Limerick, when you choose that, can be shown. And this allows you to just pull, the data is also open, so you can pull the data down for your community. So if you choose Limerick, you can pull it down, and then it's yours to use for your community advocacy or for your own research as well. So what's up next? Well, we've got winter coming in a lot of places in Canada. Snow, hopefully not in Victoria. And so we want to collect, some seasonal issues, what happens to people out on the streets in the winter in different parts of Canada. October is a very big pedestrian month. We have the Mois de Piéton in Quebec, and so we're going to be doing outreach there as well to collect data with community partners. We have a graduate student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, who's going to be doing outreach in the Bronx, New York. And that's one of the reasons we've translated the website into Spanish. And as well, we're going to be really focusing on our outreach to be more targeted, to reach those hard to reach people. We know we have to work so much extra hard to get their experiences and their lived, just what the barriers are for them. And we know we need to do a better job, and we have to keep working in that space. And finally, understanding advocacy for pedestrians is really challenging. Canada has very little advocacy for pedestrians going on. We're discovering, and so we're learning. It feels like people don't know that they can ask for nicer stuff. I think we need to. Certainly it's so different than working in the cycling advocacy area. And anyways, I've been learning a lot over the course of the last couple of days here. So just to shout out to our wonderful research team from across Canada and the US. And I welcome to hear your questions, and please get in touch if you'd like to learn more and have your community on our visualization page. Thank you.
We're going to do all the questions at the end. If that's
sounds
okay.
good.
So thanks very much, Karen. Thank you, Clicker. Yeah. Kieran, do you think will we go to Tim? Super. Okay. Well, I've introduced Tim. He's an Olympian, also from Canada, and focusing on race walking and working. So I will pass over to Tim now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let's hope it works this time. Apologies for the technical issues. All righty. Okay, thank you everyone for attending the session. As you've heard, we've got two presenters here in this session. I'll focus on the programming, and Jane will explain the broader linkages we're trying to make with race walking at the global level. So Walking Champion, a typical Canadian bilingual title for a programming, is a program developed for delivery in Alberta schools in Canada, enabling participants to select what champion they would like to be from the list identified here on this slide. Participants, champions of the environment, active transportation champions, role models, championing various other walks, even being mentors as part of this program. What we'd like to do in this program is get the idea across.
Your slides aren't progressing. I don't know if you can put it on so they can. We're seeing the overview at the moment, and they're not moving on to slide 2 or slide 3.
Okay, is it still the first slide now?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm also getting about a 3-second feedback, so it's really difficult to speak and hear myself 3 seconds later. Should I just continue?
Yes. Okay, it's on slide 2 now. So, So I don't know if you heard that. Sorry, but if you can share your presentation rather than just PowerPoint.
So without the slides? I mean, I can just speak to what was on the slides.
That might be. Sorry about the technology glitches. I think everyone has been having challenges like this for 2 years. But if you can maybe just speak to the program and with Jane as well. I think that would be very helpful for everyone. Oh, we got it. We got it.
Uh-oh. Okay, what do we have? Because I saw it briefly there. It's all over the map.
That's it there. Can you hear me? I'm doing this from my computer.
Yes.
Okay, Tim, do you want to start? I'm doing this from my computer.
Okay. So I've presented through that first slide. So I'm going to focus on programming with Jane explaining the broader linkages. The programs are developed for delivery in Alberta schools in Canada, enabling participants to participate in and select what champion they would like to be. With participants can be champion in one element of these or all. It's completely up to them. So what we do here is expose school-age youth to the benefits of walking as a means of enhancing physical and mental health and wellness. We promote walking as broadly accessible activity and also include an optional competitive element that challenges students to emulate current international star athletes. The program as a whole promotes the values of Olympism via natural linkages between walking champion de marche and the Olympic discipline of race walking.
So we're all race walkers, and we're all walkers in one form or the other. Not all race walkers, but the aim of this program is forging a link between walking as an accessible form of health and wellness and the Olympic discipline of race walking, and introducing new participants to race walking. And we're trying to reach specific disadvantaged populations. And it also assists the Olympic movement to achieve its various objectives, including youth engagement, relevance for a broader society, and promotion of Olympism through an historic Olympic discipline, and creating that link between something so simple as walking that the majority of the population can do, and leveraging the connection to an elite sport with successful international athletes. Now, everybody has their own styles depending on how fast or how hard you want to work out and walk. The main goal of this is connecting the youth to lifelong healthy habits, while also introducing them to race walking, not only as a participant, but educating them about what is often a misunderstood discipline of athletics. Of course, it would be amazing if some participants became competitive race walkers, but at the very least, through practical sessions, learning the race walking technique, every participant will come away with an increased knowledge, understanding, and the physical demands of the discipline. It's literally a step-by-step approach to increasing race walking numbers and fans. And if they don't become competitive race walkers, they will at least have created basic daily habits and the understandings of the importance of exercise and how easy it is to make walking part of their routine life in their local community. Now, the targeted populations focus on youth and schools and areas of the community that are not as physically active as others, using current programs already in existence to promote walking. Some of those programs are the Girls Only Walk program and Park Run, that's in the process of promoting Park Walk as part of their weekly events. Aboriginal communities in Canada are particularly suitable targets for this initiative, with relatively low levels of physical activity, and their reserves are often walkable with all amenities in close proximity. And the biggest thing about this program, it's free for participants. Now, the key project personnel in this program, in Walking Champions de Marche, are current and former Olympians and elite athletes from around the world. And they all have a passion for health and wellness and are utilising their profiles to simultaneously promote walking, race walking, and healthy lifestyles. Between the six of them, they have 19 Olympic Games and 6 Olympic medals. Every Olympic Games is represented from 1992 until the present. And one of the biggest stars being Robert Korzenowski from Poland, who is a 4-time Olympic champion. Now, as part of these key project personnel, there's the program ambassador, Evan Dunphy. Now, Evan is an Olympic bronze medalist, he's Canadian, and is extremely passionate about all things walking and its positive effects on the community. The ambassador role is really key to instill the Olympic values, which are to improve sport, culture, and education. There are 3 Olympic values: respect, friendship, and excellence. Now, having an elite race walker as a role model engages the youth and inspires them to participate. Evan relays his story about being a young kid, participating in sport, and growing up to become the elite athlete and international medalist that he is today. But it also teaches the participants valuable lessons that are intrinsic life skills like participation, adaptability, resilience. So Evan's not only talking the talk, but literally walking the walk. Now, the domestic program partners are Everactive Schools, Tim, is Tim on board there? I can't hear.
Tim is back, but I'm not sure, is he hearing us?
I'm not sure. I can continue if you'd like.
Yeah, Yeah, that'd be super. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry about this. Now, they've got a number of domestic program partners, from the Everactive schools to the local Edmonton International Athletics Committee to the bigger funder of the program, the Canadian Olympic Committee Legacy Grant. And as you can see, that there's the Shape Winter Walk and the local governments as well, and the Pace Performance Enhancement Incorporated business. There's also international programming that we've taken ideas from and working with them. The Robin Heffernan Race Walking Academy in Ireland there, which they've come together especially through COVID times and really built up a number of race walkers around the country. And we also have Robert Korzenowski, who I mentioned before, and he has a Walking Lovers program who promotes walking throughout Poland. And the Park Walk and Park Run program, and having the International I Walk Week, promoting walking through that. So the program is utilising throughout the year different days and different programs that are local as well as international. Now, this year has been the first year, so you can see that they're just building up. They've had a pilot program and they're just working on the initial review. The big aim is promoting things throughout the year to activate the youth and these communities, these disadvantaged populations that may not have access to other sports. And this is where walking comes into it. You can walk like a champion. Now, at the moment, the initial focus on school programs in Alberta in Canada, but they're also targeting girls and Indigenous communities throughout, and introducing a little bit of a competition element. And we're hopefully that can be spread nationally, and it's obviously able to be spread internationally with the links that we have with the number of groups around the world. Walking as part of athletics is the most accessible discipline of a truly global sport. And the diversity and wide geographical distribution of race walking nations, every area on the planet is represented in race walking competitions and in the podiums, in the top 8 of the World Championships and Olympic Games. So our aim is to make walking popular again. And at every form, whether you're a walker, a power walker, a race walker, or just a street walker or a fun walker, we want to unite that big family of walkers, which includes the whole world. Thank you very much, and I'm very sorry about the technical difficulties that we've had today.
No, listen, thanks very much for that, Jane and Tim. Tim, I'm sure you thought qualifying for the Olympics was hard, and then you had to, those technological difficulties. Our heart goes out to you. So, but thanks, we got a very good overview of the presentation. So apologies for the technological difficulties, but we got the overall impression. We're going to do questions at the end, if that's okay. So, and the feedback 3 seconds after must be really disturbing. I'm so sorry for that. We'll be doing questions and answers at the end, if that's okay. So we'll move on to the next presentation now. Thanks very much. Okay, so our next presenter is Niels Linhart, who works for the Voetgangersbeweging, the pedestrian movement, an NGO that focuses on sustainable mobility and placemaking. Niels carries out various duties across many different projects and is the primary graphics designer in the team. In the case of the project force, Niels helps cities and local governments during the planning phase and with the infrastructure of installing a park. Niels studied English literature at Antwerp University and design at St. Lucas School of Arts. He has a professional background in advertising with a focus on sustainable brands. So big round of applause for Niels, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to be presenting this, but this is very much a team effort, and I want to thank my colleague Kelly Thierens, who is in the room. Yes, she's in the back, without whom none of this would have been possible. So thank you, Kelly. Maybe before I kick this off, I would want to ask you all a question. Who here thinks they get enough exercise weekly or daily? That's not too bad. That's not too bad. I didn't put my own hand up because I know myself. Well, let's just take a little look at the context why we started this project, a project that seeks to connect walking as a active mode of transportation with other ways of being active in a public and free available exercise space. The context, of course, I'm not sure if I still need to say this, cue the dramatic music, the global pandemic. There's a lot of people in Flanders, we noticed, who have a sedentary lifestyle, and this exasperated things greatly. In the end, we noticed that only 1 in 10 teenagers was moving enough, so we thought, well, there's something to be done here. We all know the quarantine 15, the 15 pounds we all put on, or I did anyways. And then, of course, this was part of everything that was happening. Gyms closing down, PE classes were not being given in schools anymore, team sports were forbidden, and people were stuck in this sedentary lifestyle, and this led to, of course, an increase of feeling unwell, depression, and we all, by now we know, people need public infrastructure in their own neighborhood to exercise and feel better. So this is the context of why we started this project. And with we, I mean the voetgangersbeweging, or the pedestrian movement, and Infopunt Publieke Ruimte, which is a branch of the voetgangersbeweging focused on bringing together local governments to ensure that everything being developed is of nice quality, making better public spaces, nicer public spaces. So together we developed Project Force. Let's take a look at the goals of the project. Increased walkability of neighborhoods, ensuring social inclusion, creating a more lively public space, facilitating exercise, making sure people don't have to move mountains in order to, well, move mountains, exercise, strengthening neighborhood cohesion, and promoting a healthy lifestyle altogether. So those were the goals in general, but what does this mean if we take a look at reality? This is Kalke, which is a sub-municipality of the municipality Lana. It's a small community, 5,500 people in Flanders. They were the first town to take part in the project and sign up for it. And it's very much been a learning experience for the community as well as for us as a organization, being completely new to this whole fitness aspect and having to learn a lot about getting the materials to Belgium and stuff like that, because we import everything ourselves. So let's take a look at how we achieved the goals set out. The walkability of neighborhoods. We all know how important data is. Sadly to say, we're still very much mining our data, so we had to make ends meet. Thank you, Google Maps, for helping us with that. In the center, you can see Kalken, which is where where the park, maybe I should say, Project Force is a way for communities to get calisthenics parks. We all know calisthenics by now, in the neighborhoods where there was no means for public exercise before. So this is where the first park was installed. And if we take a look at the blue circle, that's the closest possibility for people in the neighborhood to actually get some exercise. It's a gym, so you have to pay a membership. It's about 100 euros every month, so it's not cheap. With rising cost of living nowadays, that's a big hurdle for a lot of people, and it's about an hour's 1.5 hours away, a walk away. So that's not really doable, and we want to connect walking with exercise. So 1 hour and 10 minutes. I'm sorry, I was exaggerating for dramatic effect. So. You know, that's a lot of walking to do, and that's fine. but in everyday life, it's maybe not so easy to make that kind of time. I think everybody knows here, exercising itself takes a lot of time. So if you have to count the hours walk alongside that, that's a bit much maybe for people. And we believe that every neighborhood, even the smallest ones, need their own public infrastructure, public space to get ready and exercise. So that's the walkability, just getting the infrastructure closer to where people are. Now, another goal we set out was social inclusion. Now, we all know calisthenics parks, and we all know the image associated with it, I think. It's all macho men doing crazy things, hanging from the bars, which is very nice, but it's not necessarily for everyone. And that's why, design-wise, we made the choice for a pink calisthenics park, which has been met with mixed opinions. Certain members of the community say, why pink? Well, that's because we want to break the stigma and create a place where other kinds of people feel welcome as well. So that's the typical image versus what we try to achieve, to get teenage girls, women, elderly people involved in daily exercise. Another very important aspect is the location itself can help a lot with ensuring the social inclusion. If we take a look here in the center is where the park is located. You can see it maybe, it's not very high quality, it's still Google Maps. So, but in the vicinity you can see there's a couple of schools, primary schools. There's a place for social housing, so people of lower incomes have accessibility to a public and free available space for exercise. And there's also a nursing home. And that's something we really want to put a focus on, that everybody involved, all the stakeholders, the community, the people of local government, really reach out to the people at, for instance, the nursing homes, be it the physical therapists, that they take the people there and give them a taste of this kind of physical exercise. Now, creating a more lively public space might be a bit much, but it's pretty straightforward. Walking is one thing, but you want to give people a destination. So where the park is now, it used to be a meadow, which is nice, but it's not really inviting for a lot of people to come and create a community. Apart from being green, which is perfect, of course. We always want to include greenery in the planning of the parks, so that's nice, but it could have been more, so we created the park. And another thing which is very important for us is the inclusion of infrastructure like the benches and stuff like that, so people really have a place to come in when they're done exercising, sit down, have a laugh with their friends, and learn from each other. Then facilitating for us meant making everything as easy as possible and as accessible as possible. In terms of local government, we, together with the municipality, the first municipality, Kalke, we created a step-by-step program, taking everyone involved from the youth, youth workers, people involved with schools, etc., and telling them, well, this is how you can reach the necessary people in the community. We gave them planning tools where we're also always offering a help desk, so if they get stuck with anything, we can help them out. And then the end user, we created online exercise videos, schedules, and then there's also this Teach the Teacher moment, which we organize, And it's actually just, it's very straightforward. It's like the paying it forward mentality. So we have a licensed teacher. He comes to the park. Then 10 or 15 people can sign up and become ambassadors for the park, and they get the lesson so they can give the lessons themselves, and so on and so forth, making a snowball effect for physical fitness. Yeah. So this is just a small example of the step-by-step program, and then how we help them with planning the park and creating a nice environment altogether. You can see the park being opened, so that's also very important, creating the necessary buzz when it's opened, so all stakeholders feel involved. People, the ambassadors get a sense of ownership at that moment. We ask them to be involved when the park is being installed. So it's very much a way to get them feeling as if it's really their park and not just the park of the local government. And this is then a picture of the Teach the Teacher lesson in action. Then, of course, the strengthening the community. That's why we make these assets for them to use on social media, so they can claim to be a Force ambassador and show some pride and hopefully get people along in the story of Force. And then, of course, one thing that we're still working on very much is this promotional aspect. When we create the buzz and the press is there, of course, we always want to make sure that it's visible and we create a sort of identity for the project itself. The ambassadors get the bag so they can kind of wave the flag of the project. And then I think this is kind of the recap. The thing is, it's the most important part, which I kind of missed, is how affordable we've kept it, and that's because we're a non-profit, so we're not in it for the money, and that's kind of why we think it's easier for local governments to get the Force parks everywhere instead of just where you would expect it, the center of the town or the local sports infrastructure. So this is really a lot smaller, but should be more widely spread, so to speak. And then the next step, this is still a pilot project, so the next step is going to market and really expanding throughout Flanders. So, thank you.
That's brilliant, thanks. And we'll, please do remember all your questions for each presentation, and we'll go to questions at the end. So our next speaker is online. Dear God, what's going to happen now? So our next speaker is Charlotte Angerand, who's a graduate of landscape architecture, and she joined TUSA PA in 2021. As a mobility project manager within the association, she's devoted to the development of pedestrian mobility in Wallonia in Belgium. She specialises in active mobility, and her work consists of representing pedestrians' interests in mobility decision-making processes, creating networks, and leading citizen meetings. So Charlotte, best of luck. Let's see what happens here.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Not yet? Okay. Up. Can you see it?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, so let's start. So let's present TUSA PA and how to develop networks of pedestrian pathways in Wallonia. So first of all. We are a non-profit organization. We are located in Belgium and more precisely in Wallonia. So it's a region that hosts almost 4 million inhabitants, or as we like to say, almost 4 million pedestrians. It makes pedestrians the largest community in Wallonia, so it needs to be recognized, heard, represented, and protected. So here we are. Oops. Better. Here we are, the voice of pedestrian community to defend their interests at many levels, for example, in political decisions. We have several goals, but the main ones are to promote walking, of course, but also to increase its modal share in both utilitarian and leisure travels. To do that, we have a team of 8 persons with quite different profiles and skills that allows us to have many projects. But today I will only present one of them, which is networks of pedestrian pathways. A small definition of what are these networks. So they are made of walkable roads. So I mean by that pathways and tracks that are not mainly dedicated for cars and driving. You have some example on the pictures below. And these roads, walkable roads, are linking daily life hubs on a territory. These networks we work on are at a municipality scales, and the process to build these networks are a 3 times process on local pathways. So we have a first one, which is identification. Then we have to give characteristics about this pathway, so qualification, and finally a selection process to build a final pedestrian network. We build network with the help of citizens, local dwellers, but also with municipalities, administrations, because they call on us. And the main goal is to help to enhance walk possibilities over driving ones. To build networks of pedestrian pathway, we use our own methodology, trying to be as relevant, sustainable as possible. And it's the 4 steps methodology that I'm going to explain. To build a network, we have to begin with inventories. So we have to know what are the roads and pathways on the territory. So we begin with finding a database. So we use OpenStreetMap, that you may all know, that gives a first overview of what is supposed to be used each day or frequently. As OpenStreetMaps has absolutely no legal value, we have to determine legal value. So we use legal reference we have in Wallonia. So it's a byways atlas from the 19th century, so a quite old map that help us to know which pathways are public and which ones are private. We also use all encoding modifications like road creation or road suppression that have been made since 1841. So we can have an overview of what is public and what is not. To go further, we can use other resources like cadastral plan, or it depends on what is available on the territory. So we can have a first map, a first inventory that, that show us where people are supposed to walk and where they're not. But we have to go, to collect more data, because we have to know what are the real conditions of all those pathways. So we work on a second inventory, and here we work with volunteers. We need them to collect data on the field. So we ask them different data that will help to complete our first legal inventories. We are searching for features of pathways and many other observations, as you can see here. So we ask volunteers if they had walking struggled, maybe due to dense vegetation, slopes, gates, and we take all of that to make real condition inventory. Volunteers use our methodology. We provide maps. They can use colors, photographies to compile all these data. At the end, once it's done on the field, we can close our second inventories. So we add all these new data to legal ones on our software, and we obtain an overview of what is public, what is private, and also real condition. So it's a really helpful tool, especially for municipalities' administration, to take decision and manage all of their pathways heritage. But it also helps to highlight conflicts, sometimes in real conditions of the pathways and their legal statute. Once we have our full inventory, so we know characteristics of pathways, we need to make a diagnosis, which is the second step of our methodology. To do that, we make two diagnoses. A first one is an objective one that we made with a software, and we have a second one, which is led by a subjective appreciation made by volunteers. The first diagnosis helps to give a score to each pathways and objective scores, which is based on different criteria. Do pathways match or not match? We will have to give a final point that gives us a map with an overview of objective quality of pathways. But it's not enough to build a network, because we are searching to build a pedestrian network. We need to know to add an information about where local citizens want to walk or do not want to walk. So we do a second diagnosis based on volunteers' appreciation. So they have to identify the pathways they like to use the most and the less. And it makes another map with an overview of subjective priority for local citizens for a pathway to be used daily. Both diagnosis and inventories make it possible to design a first network for pedestrian pathways, because now we have all the clue to make a well-advised choice to select pathways. So, how do we design pedestrian networks based on our inventories and diagnoses? We've asked once again volunteers, local dwellers, to first identify their needs, their daily needs. So, local attractive hubs. It can be a school, it can be a train station they go every day or once a week. It can be a grocery, everything they need. Once they pointed out where they need to go by foot, we ask them to share their territory knowledge, but to identify and select the pathways and roads that could be linked all these hubs. It's based on their knowledge, of course, but also based on the diagnosis, objective and subjective ones. At the end of that, we have a first network, hubs and roads that volunteers identified. And we can now go on the network creation. So we work with the municipalities administration that will have to define the final network based on the proposition of volunteers, but also inventories and diagnosis of pathways. Once we have this final network, we split it in 3 other smaller networks, a short-term one, which is composed with pathways that can be used right now because inventories show that they are in real good condition and legal statute allows people to walk on. We also have medium and long-term networks where inventories highlighted some problem we have to solve first, as legal conflict or sometimes pathways need to be needs a glow up before. Then we have the last step of networks of pedestrian pathways. It's real networks in real life. So Tous-à-Pied provides maps, information maps, where dwellers can read the whole networks on their territory, showing the attractive hubs and also all the tracks they can use. And we also mark out the territory with small arrows. So all citizens can use these networks and can be easily linked towards hubs. To conclude, today in Wallonia, it's almost 20 municipalities that have been marked out during the last years, and it's a dozen more that have already engaged in this project. So that will be marked out in the next years. And if our pedestrians networks are useful, relevant, and sustainable for pedestrian mobility, it's because of all the involved citizens that share their needs with us, but also their knowledge of their territory. So thank them, and thank you for listening.
That's great. Thanks very much, Charlotte. We're going to keep the questions to the end, if that's okay. And sorry, I just need to get this slide on. And our final speaker before we have questions is Dylan Power. Dylan is a PhD researcher based in the Centre for Health Behaviour Research at the Southeast Technological University in Waterford. Dylan also works as an embedded researcher in Get Ireland Walking. Dylan's PhD focuses on developing a systems approach to walking promotion at local level in Ireland. Thanks, Dylan.
Okay. Hello, everybody. As Brian said, my name is Dylan. I'm a PhD student based in Waterford in the Centre for Health Behaviour Research. What I'm going to present on today is about 2.5 to 3 years worth of a PhD in about 10 minutes. So bear with me if I leave things out, but I'm going to kind of zoom in on one piece or one element of my PhD. As Brian also mentioned, I'm a embedded researcher within Get Ireland Walking. So what that means for me is I'm an employee of an organisation, but I'm also a PhD student immersed within the academic environment. And as well as that, a lot of the direction that my PhD takes kind of listens to what Get Ireland Walking want to do and where they want to take the initiative, and my research tries to fit in around that and see how it can complement that. So I started in 2019, and a lot of the conversations that we were having at the time with Get Ireland Walking and with the supervisory team, Dr. Barry Lamb and Professor Niamh Murphy, we were starting to listen to Get Ireland Walking in terms of where they wanted to go with the initiative. And a lot of it was about trying to understand the nitty-gritty of walking promotion at a local level, like what it actually looked like on the ground, who the organisations were, what the policies were, what the interventions were, and how was it all connected. And there were a few questions that kept popping up. You know, we were talking about this idea of core components, what works on the ground in terms of walking promotion. What does the whole picture look like? What does this big complex mess look like in terms of things I mentioned earlier, organisations, policies, etc. And if we could package it up in such a way that other counties can learn from it, wouldn't that be great? These were the types of things that we were starting to talk about at the beginning. But the question on the bottom right there was one that kept popping up a lot, which was about how do we get organisations who work on walking at a local level to align their work. And we know from the conversations over the last 2 days that walking is not just from health or sport or physical activity, it's from transport, planning, urban design, and the list goes on. And this was a big question that we were interested in as researchers, and that Get Ireland Walking and Jason and the team were definitely interested in. So meanwhile, I'm starting a PhD, I'm reading a lot and trying to familiarise myself with what's going on in the literature, and I'm coming across a lot of papers, and there's a bit of a groundswell at the minute about this idea of the use of systems thinking and systems approaches in physical activity promotion and public health more broadly. And, you know, there's a paper that I constantly go back to by Harry Rutter and colleagues that was published in The Lancet that kind of advocate for this more complex view of public health problems. And it talks about, you know, we need a shift in thinking, and as researchers, we need to reframe the way we ask questions about research projects more generally. And it talks about this idea of embracing complexity. Now, that's a bit of a woolly statement, and that it's something that, like, researchers are struggling with. I think this idea of embracing complexity, what does that mean? You know, but things that we can do to start working towards this idea of embracing the complexity of problems rather than running away from it. Or the white text was a bad choice on my part. Things like engaging with multiple sectors, and I think that has to happen if we're seriously considering, you know, seeing the whole picture of obesity or physical inactivity or whatever it is. Using different data sources and different evidence sources of evidence rather than focusing on, you know, the traditional hierarchy of evidence that we use in public health that places RCTs at the top, for example. And the last bit there about the use of system science methods, like things like social network analysis and different types of modelling and systems mapping can be used to help get a sense of what the complexity of a problem might look like. So I took a step back out then, and I was like, okay, maybe what Get Ireland Walking want to look at is the system of walking promotion at a local level. And maybe the use of these system science methods and different techniques can actually help us. And I started to join the dots from that perspective. So what we did was we went to the People's Republic of Cork, and we chose Cork as the test county to kind of test out this systems approach and this way of working. And we chose Cork for a number of reasons. We had strong organisational ties there with Get Ireland Walking and that. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to try this systems approach to walking promotion in Cork. And the first step in any systems approach, and it's in a lot of papers, and there's some work in Ireland as well as part of the IPAC project, this is ongoing as well, is trying to get a sense of what the overall system actually looks like, what the problem looks like. And you can use different tools to do that. One of them is called systems mapping. And what we did was we engaged with stakeholders from transport, from tourism, from leisure, sport, all these different organisations that are relevant to walking promotion at a local level. And we conducted a systems mapping workshop. But we did something a little bit different than what has been done previously, in that we kind of took a systems map that existed elsewhere and applied it to the Cork context to try and streamline the process a little bit, especially because it was done online over COVID and that. But we asked the stakeholders two main questions. The first one, which focused about what are we doing well in Cork? What are the things that are happening well in the system of walking in Cork? And the second one, which I think was the most important bit, which was how can we improve, and what do we need to change in the system of walking in Cork? So those were the two questions that we asked, and we ended up with this big, lovely headache of a diagram that I'm not going to show. But what we found was that there were 35 examples of good practice interventions within the system of walking in Cork that the stakeholders identified. But there were also 19 solutions that were offered to problems within the system. And I think that's the crux of it there. But what we wanted to do then is try to make sense of it in such a way that it wouldn't just sit on the shelf somewhere, and we could actually start to take action from it. And we used the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity to do that. For those of you who aren't aware of what this is a kind of global call to action that's been published by the World Health Organization that kind of advocates for a systems approach to physical activity at a national level. And they kind of outline a number of different actions that exist across a number of different strategic objectives. Some focused on the individual level, some focused on the societal level, others focused on the environment and what we can do in terms of our infrastructure to facilitate physical activity, and others relating to these more upstream interventions relating to policy and data and things like that. And what this document basically says is that it's a combination of all of these things that can help facilitate systems change for physical activity. But we mapped the outcomes of the Cork workshop onto these strategic objectives. Some of you might be familiar with this diagram, but this is what we did was, as I said, we overlaid the results of the workshops in Cork onto this. And what we found was that the majority of good practice example interventions that were being implemented in Cork existed within this create active people space, which is focused mainly on, individual level interventions, community in the community or healthcare settings or elsewhere. And these are all well and good, and we need these. But in terms of their potential to influence population levels of behaviour, it's fairly modest or none at all. But where the stakeholders in Cork suggested that they needed to take action were in different areas of the system. So interventions that were suggested to help solve some of the problems were in this create active systems quadrant, for example, which kind of focuses on how we use our data, the governance mechanisms that we have, communication structures and things like that. So this kind of all happened over COVID, and what we tried to do this year, back in April, was to re-engage the stakeholders, to firstly talk through some of these solutions and talk through some of the good practice examples, firstly to see where they're still relevant, because a year or so had passed and it's a completely different landscape now in walking more broadly. But we brought them together in April, and what we wanted to do in that workshop was to try and put some meat on the bones in terms of trying to flesh out these solutions and potential interventions into actually tangible actions. And we, the results of this workshop in April is seen on the right there. We have an action plan and a workshop outcomes report that outlines 24 actions within that are a responsibility of organisations from sport, health, local government, the list goes on. And it really is multidisciplinary action that's needed to implement this workshop plan that we're hopefully going to launch at the end of the week. So just some key messages I want to leave before I start wrapping things up. One important learning that I think from this work is the way that we kind of use pre-existing systems thinking tools as a shortcut. Like a lot of the barriers to entry, I suppose, in terms of adopting these methods, that's cited in the literature anyway, is that there's kind of this perceived notion that we need to have a strong skill set and specific skill set to work with different types of data and programs and whatever. And yes, there are methods to do that, but I think if the way in which we used them was a nice way to streamline that process. The second point there, we have a walk and promotion officer in post in Cork, Alison, who's doing absolutely unbelievable work and acting as that middleman, bringing people together, joining the dots in terms of the organisations and facilitating this whole process. I can, take these tools and stay in my ivory tower as an academic all I want, but if we don't have somebody on the ground joining these dots, I don't think this is going to work. And if we're serious about multidisciplinary action on walking or physical activity more broadly, we need to have one of these roles in every county. I would love to see that. And look, the jury is still out and the PhD research is still kind of ongoing, but I think what's important to note is introducing these system thinking tools in a more subtle way, whether it's through the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity or the use of pre-existing tools that are out there, is a nice way, I think, to facilitate this cross-sectoral communication and this cross-sectoral collaboration between stakeholders. So what's going on from now? So I've a year left in the PhD, and what the plan for me now is to try and monitor this ongoing. And you, as I said at the beginning, using different data sources that we have available, and using different techniques as well, like social network analysis and other forms of data like that, to monitor communication between sectors and to see, who the key players are, how does it change over time. And that's from the research perspective, but we're hosting a satellite event in Cork on Friday, where this project will be talked about, and we have colleagues from Patch for All from Scotland there as well, giving some talks too, which will be great. And if any of you are around or available to come on Friday, that'll be super. If anyone wants to be bored to sleep, we have a paper published on this. There's the details of it there. This was published last year, earlier on this year, sorry, in the European Journal of Public Health. I think it's good just to get, it was launched at the HEPA Europe conference in Nice a couple of weeks ago. And it's good to get global eyes on this, and to kind of, this research is hopefully trying to fill that gap, you know, in terms of the practical application of these methods and tools, and what it can actually mean for stakeholders on the ground. So if anyone is interested in reading a bit more about that, or I can chat with anybody after, that'd be no problem. So thanks very much for your attention. I just want to say thanks to Niamh and Barry, my two supervisors, for the 3 years up until now, with all the help that they've given, and thanks to Jason for backing this research from day one, and he was described as an epic hero yesterday, so you're an epic hero. Thanks very much, Jason, and thanks to you all for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So maybe if I can ask just the presenters, Dylan, Niels and Karen, just to sit up here, and we have our online speakers as well. So just to remind you that, like, the people who spoke, we had Jane and Tim from Canada talking about Walking Champions de Marche, Karen Labrie talking about Walk Roll Map, Niels talking about Project Force, Charlotte talking about pedestrian pathways, and Dylan talking about Get Ireland Walking, Get Cork Walking. So if you have any questions, if you put up your hand and I'll give you the microphone, and if you can just wait until you have a microphone so the online people can hear. There you go. And if you introduce yourself and just, yeah.
Thank you. Rosario Keeley from Waterford Sports Partnership, and thanks for all the talks. They were really great and interesting and mind is buzzing. A particular question for Karen. Really interested in the collection of data from that rich source of people who live in the area and know what the issues are. How does that in reality then connect to the actioning of some of the points raised, whether there's a safety issue? So from your gathering the data, how does it, in our context, it would be the local authority that would be in the position mostly to act on or take account. So what's that partnership like, and has that been a challenge in different areas in your experience?
So I'm going to draw upon our experience with bike maps, because we just launched Walk Roll Map less than a year ago, so we haven't really had enough data yet to share that. But in our experience, what we've done is, whenever possible, combine as many sources of data that we can. So, you know, official sources, and then overlay it with the, you know, the lived experience, the crowdsourced data, and have that illuminate, you know, the different points on the map. So that's typically what we've done. And so I can see with the data from Walk Roll Map, we need a local champion to kind of connect the municipality with the data or the research, and just make that connection. But certainly what we've been finding with the bike maps data is, a lot of times a municipality, particularly if they're smaller and they don't have as many resources as a big city, they want to engage in an active transportation plan, and they start and they realize we don't have any data. And so if they're lucky, people have been mapping on these, you know, like on say bike maps, or now on Walk Roll Map, and we can hand over all this wonderful rich data to them, and you know, it's a real boon for them. So I see that's how it's going to go. You know, we can provide the data, combine it with whatever else we can get our hands on. Sometimes it's quite sparse. It just depends what's out there.
Cool. We have another question here.
Yeah, my name is Tom Ryan. Great presentations, guys. A question for Dylan. With regards to the toolkit that you have that you're rolling out in Cork, how scalable is it with regard to active ageing and the demographic shift that we have within Ireland of seniors over the next 10 to 15 years, which will grow by over 48%? Will it be able to map active ageing?
Well, I suppose the the framework that we used was the Australian systems map for physical activity as that kind of framework to recruit the participants, but also to structure the workshops. And that systems map is based on a body of evidence that includes the determinants of physical activity, one of which is age. I'm not aware of a systems map for older aging or older adults. But even in relation to within that systems map, but the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity outlines a specific action within that's focused on the implementation of physical activity interventions in different settings. One of them focused on older adults. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question. I'm not 100% sure of any tools specifically for that.
All good.
Okay. Any other questions? Or for our people online as well, don't forget Charlotte and Tim and Jane. And again, if you just introduce yourself, thanks.
Hiya, how are you? Madeline Lies, my name. I have a question for Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte, online. I'm just wondering about, congratulations on your lovely project and the work that you're doing. I'd be just interested to hear about, have you had to do any specific work or interventions to try and reach kind of underrepresented groups or hear from them a little bit more in kind of designing or pulling out data, or just learning about the network that you've got, which is kind of informal. Some of those paths are obviously cut through, they're not covered in tarmac, some of them, they're just sort of paths that have been there a long time. And I love that you've pulled from old maps to understand walking. That's something I really want to try in Ireland and see what that would do. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind expanding a little bit on how you might have connected to groups that are maybe less digital or less easily connected with traditionally. Thank you.
If I understood the question, so it's how we take into account all pedestrians, like all kind of mobility into pedestrians, like for example, groups as women, or is it the question? To be sure.
Nodding. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So when we work with volunteers, so usually we have different groups that are represented. So usually when they show their needs, we match to different small groups' needs. But we also use inventories to have an overview of what could be the needs of everyone to be inclusive. For example, when we know that the surface of pathways are not pretty good or are ground and grass, we know that if we take it into a network, maybe some people who have disability could not walk on there. So we try to regroup all our data and all citizens that represent groups to make a network that could be used by everyone. But sometimes it can be hard to take into account everyone's needs, but we try really hard, and we try to improve our methodology to take into account every needs of every pedestrians. If it gives you an answer.
Great. We probably have time for one more question. Okay. You're very shy. Okay. Okay. Well, listen. I'll just wrap up. We'd like to thank all our brilliant presenters. A big round of applause for all our presenters. And also, sorry for our tech team at the back who've been very good and struggling through all the difficulties with that, but thank them as well. Yep, thanks. And just I suppose on my behalf, as I said, I work with a local community group, and we're trying to create a more walkable community. And I said it yesterday. I gave a small presentation yesterday that in that we are so reliant on the research and the case studies that are developed by people like you and people who present at these conferences, and we're really, fighting to regain our community for pedestrians, and we're relying on you. So you are actually freedom fighters, and we would really like to thank you very much for that. And please keep up the good work that you're doing. So, and a round of applause for yourselves as well. Thank you. And so that's it, folks. So it's lunchtime now, and we're going over to that little tented village, and the food trucks are over there. You should all have vouchers for lunch, and if you don't, if you talk to one of the volunteers, they'll sort you out. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.